everyone. Thank you so much, Rohan, for joining us today. I wanted to have a very exciting, interaction with you on the work you're doing. Specifically, I love the idea of agentification, but as we went through this process of taking it to clients, we have figured out that businesses are very heterogeneous. Um, they are contextual and they differentiate based on the heterogeneity. So I love the work you're doing on weaving context into agents. I mean, the world is talking about agentification, but when I get to clients, they start to think about how does this deal with culture? How does this deal with the context of a company? And when the first time I spoke to you, you spoke about work graphs. It kind of just caught my attention. The fact that you're one of the founders of a company which pioneered work graphs, you seem to be in the right spot to feed that into the AI engine to make it contextual.
No, thanks, Ravi. Thank you for having me. No, I think you're spot on. The ongoing revolution in AI is all about changing how humans and machines interface with each other. So 15 years ago, there was AI, but it was sitting in the back end doing fraud detection for credit cards and so on. But now it's in the front end. It changes how every human being interacts and perceives value from a machine. And it turns out the system of record for all of those interactions is interaction data, or how humans and machines talk to each other.
So how does this happen practically? If I go about telling you that build a work graph, so here is how I understand this. You watch what a human does, and then you take that interaction data in a work graph. There is some pattern around it, and you
Right.
feed it to the LLM.
Right.
And on the other end, if there is output which is used by a human, it has context. If there is output in action, which is an agent,
Right.
then it has context, and it is then kind of customized to what an enterprise looks like. That's how I saw it simply. But if you have to put that in motion
Right.
and implement it for an organization, how would you go about it?
I think you more or less captured it, which is first and foremost, what is all of this work graph interaction data about? It is the tribal knowledge that is specific to a team, to a process, as to how a specific team gets a process done.
Right.
So how do we capture that tribal knowledge? Well, that tribal knowledge, it turns out, is the very way in which the team does work. So there's an
So do you
agent.
install a software?
There's an agent that runs on people's machines. People know it's running.
And it's an AI agent or a...
It is. It is actually a model that
Mhm.
runs on people's machines. People know it's running. Now, the goal is not to discover what is, for example, Ravi doing, to name a person and to ask what they're doing. That's the historical time and motion studies. How many hours does a person work? What do they do? That is not what we're doing. In fact, we don't allow for that. So at the point of capturing what the person is doing on the machine, the person is anonymized because we don't want to know who did what.
Got it.
Instead, then you take all of this data across the team and you aggregate it.
Mhm.
So now you've in aggregation lies anonymity.
Got
So you
it.
now focus on the team.
So you got knowledge on the community.
Exactly.
Got
Now you have tribal knowledge on this community.
Mm.
Now you take this data and you start to find patterns in it across the team.
And is that done by humans or it is actually
It's
machine?
entirely automated. And to
Okay.
find patterns in this data,
Mm.
to find sequences in this data. For example, is the team doing the same process one way or 80 different ways? For all of this, now you have a whole new class of models
Got it.
that find these patterns. And at the end result is you find all these patterns, put them together, and you produce this map of how the team got work done. What technology did they use? What steps did they execute in what technology, in what order, what sequence, what are the variations? Where did they slow down because of the technology? What patterns were repetitive, etc., and so on. And that map is called as the work graph.
And what happens next? How do you feed that to the LLM?
So once you have this map, right, now you have an LLM. The LLM only knows what happens within its walls or within its boundaries, what
Right.
you do. And so let's say you're about to use a language model to draft a contract.
Mhm.
Now, if the model knew what were the last 10 steps or 20 steps that you did, if it had that context, it would draft a more precise contract that is specific to your team.
Got it.
And so you take, now the next challenge is the work graph has a lot of information.
Yeah.
How do you figure out what are the relevant bits of information that map to the last 10 steps? But even in those last 10 steps, there's a tremendous volume of information. So what is the right subset of information that you supply as context to the model. And when you supply it as context to the model and then say, help me generate a contract, the model is actually able to generate a more correct or precise contract.
So effectively, you're taking a generic AI agent and making them contextual to a
Exactly.
organization. And when it's contextual to an organization, it's like any of your teammates.
Yes, actually, I'll go even further. We're making it contextual to a team in an organization.
Perfect.
Because no two teams are alike, usually, right?
Absolutely. So how do you wean in the information needed to build the context? Is that again done by the AI model you have?
It is.
And that is uniquely a work interaction AI model which you have built over the years.
That's exactly right. Because it turns out to understand this interaction data, to find sequences in it, then to figure out what to prioritize, what connects to what, etc., and so on. For example, if you observe someone clicking 5 times, can you decipher their KPI? That's not a trivial problem.
So what you're capturing through these word gaps is keystrokes, what systems they're accessing, what technology they're accessing, what functional teams they're interacting.
That's right. And in addition to that, also there's a lot of metadata on the screen. In addition to what they're accessing, there may be information on the screen that they're not accessing, but may be useful as well. So all of what you said, plus all the data they did not interact with, put together is.
And sometimes shortcuts.
That
a
too.
lot of teams have tribal knowledge of shortcuts they use.
And it shows up in the graph.
It shows up in the graph.
Because you start to see patterns. You'll see, some teams, in certain teams, most of them are doing work in a certain way, and then a subset of them are doing work in a much shorter way. And then you begin to ask why, and you'll figure out that because these few people have actually figured out shorter ways of achieving the same outcome, and that shows up in the work graph.
You mentioned about something called context fabric in connection to work graph. Tell us a little bit about that.
So what context fabric does is it takes the output of the work graph. Think of the work graph as everything that you have ever read for the last 1 year. Then your mind has intelligence to figure out which bits are necessary or relevant to the next action that you're going to take. And that's the intelligence that context fabric brings. It figures out of all the things in the work graph, given I know what the intent of the user or the team is for the next step, what are the relevant bits that I should fetch from this memory and then supply it as context for the next step to achieve the outcome.
It's interesting how the world of agents is evolving. It's evolving from one agent doing a bunch of things like humans do, to each agent specializing on a task.
Right.
And we're going to see a future of agents interacting with each other, or multi-agent systems,
Right.
as they call it. How do you distribute context to different agents in a process? Because it's going from one human to multiple agents doing multiple tasks.
Absolutely. So first, you alluded to something very critical, which is in every team, workflows are specific to a team, right? Or tasks are specific to a team. So the question to ask is, why aren't agents or models or tools also specific to teams? If you have workflows and work patterns specific to a team, so should your technology be specific to a team. And so therefore, the challenge is to be able to distribute context to different teams. You have to figure out what are the work patterns of the team, what are the variances of the team, what are the processes the team is doing, what is the intent of the team, what are the KPIs they're trying to achieve. Basically, all of this is contained, are derived from the tribal knowledge in the team. Once you can figure out all of these bits of information, you can then use it to then figure out where do I route different contexts to. And that's what context fabric does.
Got it. So in summary, if I see this, it's an AI agent which is specialized in work graphs, work patterns, work interactions, trying to feed AI agents who are being built for businesses in a way.
Right.
And you're kind of taking this interaction data which doesn't exist today. You are kind of synthesizing it and pushing it into these agents which are getting built and making them contextual. I mentioned this to one of our clients in a passing conversation. Of course, the HBR article the both of us wrote.
Right.
Thanks for leading that. That was a fantastic article. This client asked me this very interesting question. Context is kind of a subset of what culture is in a company.
Right.
Does this give us expansive opportunities to capture culture,
Right.
and therefore make these agents interoperable between humans and the agents, if I may.
Right.
Is there a view you had on this? I mean,
So-
and culture means multiple things. How do I empower teams? Do I have an open culture in my organization? Um, do I create psychological safety for my teams and stuff
Right.
like that?
I mean, that is the grand vision. Ultimately, if you can capture, indeed, you can digitize and capture culture. But I'll say, even without going that far today, about our estimation is about 60% of how work happens in all organizations, companies are blind to. It's in the last mile of how humans and machines interact. So even before you get to culture, do you at least complete the full picture of how your teams get work done? What makes them unique? What are the unique sources of friction that they have? What are their pain points and problems and so on? And if you can even bridge that gap, that is a huge leap forward. And that's what work graphs and context fabric and so on allow you to do. Now, the ultimate goal is to be able to get to that point. But I'd say first step, let's at least complete the loop right now.
Got it. Just following up on this, one of the aspects, we have been struggling with over the tech disruptions of general purpose technologies is productivity. And the fear in AI is the same. I mean, there is so much capex being spent at the back end.
Right.
Hopefully, the scaling laws the scaling laws now have outpaced the Moore's law.
Right.
So people say it's going to double in capacity and output in 6 months versus 18 to 24
Right.
months. In spite of that, the fear is the productivity on the other side may not be the same. The preliminary use case leverage in organizations does indicate that productivity has not improved.
Right.
And I would actually say one of the key reasons is context. I mean, context not being fed, you actually have more human effort
Right.
in spite of the output coming out of AI.
Right.
Do you see that as a big driver for, in some ways, productizing context
Absolutely.
and feeding it into an AI?
I really like how you put it. It is, you need, genericness does not necessarily lead to sufficient value, and therefore productizing context that is specific or unique to each team, what drives them, makes them successful, is a necessary condition. Now, is it sufficient? We'll find out, but it is certainly a necessary condition for all enterprise AI. I don't think there's any way of getting around it, because we have learned this in the software industry, right? I mean, software is specific or unique to a company.
In spite of the fact that it is built for repeatability.
Exactly, exactly. And there's the holy grail has always been the one grand platform that just works out of the box, like your Uber app for all organizations. It doesn't exist,
Completely.
right? And it doesn't even exist at a team level.
I mean that's the confusion we've always had. Consumer grade AI is at scale, but it doesn't need to be contextual to. It gets contextual as you use it.
Right.
Business grade AI,
Right.
enterprise grade AI has to be contextual even before you kick off
Exactly.
the process.
And here you alluded to something very important, which is to a team, right? Why is the team important? And you also alluded to the individual productivity, right? A lot of AI models and tools today are about, I'll improve the productivity of an individual. And you once explained to me, you said, look, that's great, but how does the organization reclaim that improved productivity? It's very hard.
I mean, that's been the big problem. I mean, we have created diffusion of wealth and distribution of value with the past disruptions, but we have not created net new productivity.
Right.
It's been flattish for 25 years. The last time it improved was when the internet revolution happened, and after that, productivity has been flat, and we've been spending billions of dollars.
That's right, but spend has gone up.
So your point is, team productivity is also a big driver, and context actually drives team productivity.
That's right. And therefore, shifting the emphasis from productivity of an individual to the productivity of a team is probably the right way of organizations to think. Because a team is a basic unit of execution in any organization. And it's much more tangible to say you are able to make a team more productive and then reclaim the benefits of that productivity.
Terrific. I'm going to ask you one last question, and this is a fascinating topic. I want to keep track of what the improvements and the developments are. This is going to evolve. This is not a static science.
Right.
So when organizations do this, do they also feed context to the inference time training of the models? What happens to the future state where you're working alongside machines, and therefore the context and the culture is also built based on your interactions with machines. So it's not a one-time thing. It evolves with the agent.
Right. So the idea that we published in our HBR article was about a machine learning from humans, from a team, how they work and their work patterns. We call that reverse mechanistic localization, and in turn being able to serve that team to doing something better. So it's not about just mere observation, but it's about constantly learning the dynamics of how that team works, what problems they run into, what solutions they enact, where are they fast, where are they slow, etc., and so on. Learning from all of that, and in turn, for example, doing things like, can I help the team go faster in certain areas where they commonly, slow down because it is learned patterns in the past? Can I generate certain kinds of information? Can I help the team do certain kinds of work as well, and so on? All of this is only possible if you can truly understand the context of the team and then repeatedly update yourself in the context of the team.
Absolutely. In fact, Rohan, this is similar to what autonomous driving is all about.
Right.
Autonomous driving is not about getting you a self-driven car which drives better than you, but a car which drives on the knowledge of the community.
Right.
Because you're feeding all the knowledge out to it,
Exactly.
and then it's coming back to you. So effectively, it's not about efficiently delivering better than one human, but efficiently taking the information of the community and feeding it back.
Exactly.
So that's a big plus. I mean, organizations today don't. I mean, I can go to a bank and ask a teller what the teller does.
Right.
But if I go to 50 tellers of the same bank,
Right.
I will find community knowledge which could be leveraged.
Exactly. And it is this tribal knowledge and then being able to extract it and then being able to actually help the team do something better and faster.
Absolutely. This is terrific. I mean, this is not just a productivity leverage which we spoke about. This is a top up on that.
That's right. And this information and this leverage exists in all teams today. It's just organizations are blind to it.
And it's a silo burster in some ways.
It is. And it turns out AI is the best gateway for opening this up. And AI as much needs this information because that's when AI becomes useful to every team.
Absolutely. I mean, this is terrific.
So
this
if
can
I may,
lead to good change. I mean, change in organizations. Yeah.
Right. And if I may ask you a question, Ravi, since you meet several CEOs every quarter and CIOs, of course, amongst other leaders, when all of this current AI revolution happened, many of us thought, okay, there is going to be one or two models to rule them all, like one ring to rule them all. But given, our work on localizing a model to a team and so on, how do you see the future unfolding for AI in the enterprise? Do you still think it'll be maybe one model, or how do you think this will unfold?
Rohan, the way I see this is digital labor. And when you get digital labor intertwined with human labor, the art of the possibilities are very different. I'll give you one example. A medical device company was asking us to build a digital nurse. That labor doesn't exist today. So the ability to unlock new labor pools which don't exist today, unimaginable labor pools which doesn't exist today, is a huge, unique opportunity. A lot of times we are trying to look at AI in the context of saying, what can it do which humans do today? I'm looking at the context of what can it do which humans can't do today. I think that's a huge upside. I mean, go to drug development cycles, material sciences. It's a fascinating thing. Look at it this way. Over the 50 years of tech revolution, we wanted to understand machines. This is the first time machines are wanting to understand humans. It's a path-breaking opportunity for humans to look at it from the lens that we can amplify the potential of ourselves by surrounding ourselves with machines. The thing I speak to when I speak to CEOs and CIOs across the world, I tell them most times technology was used in a flawed way. I mean, the Turing trap, as I call it, where you kind of use the technology to take human effort out. It does create upward social mobility to humans, but we haven't seen it with that context. If we wire this well, we can create upward swing on wages, because for the same input, you're going to get higher output. And you could create economic growth without inflation. It can be a deflationary force. Technology can be a deflationary force. We spoke about it, but
Right.
we couldn't get it to action. And the process of agentification is handing over the agency of humans to machines versus taking output coming out of machines and then humans explore what to do with it. So it's a unique opportunity to change the paradigm where you're kind of, the agency is distributed between the machine and human. So I think it's a unique spot to create upward social mobility. Now, the reason why context is one of my favorite topics amongst all the last mile infrastructure we're building. We are a company building last mile infrastructure
Right.
on hallucinations, on optimizing cost, on responsible AI,
Right.
which is, trust, where you have to create explainability at the end. I mean, no other technology demanded us to create the explainability. I mean, we looked at it from the lens of safety and equity,
Right.
but now we are looking at it in the lens of trust, safety, and equity. Amongst all the things I spoke about, I still felt context was the most important, because if the whole world was run by software,
Right.
I can't even imagine how you're going to create differentiation.
Right.
So, software has to be localized, integrated, and customized for enterprises. And if you had to do that, you had to actually build context, which to me is the starting point to build culture. And culture, as we all know, drives enterprise hustle. So I think the hustle of the company is what you're trying to
Right.
build on this.
Yeah.
So it is probably the biggest element in the AI landscape for enterprises.
Right.
And the ones who do it well will actually create the differentiation, and the ones who don't do it well will still agentify but don't create differentiation.
Right.
So I'm actually excited about what it does and what it can, and the future, what the future holds for us.
So what you're saying is context is a competitive differentiation between companies.
It is. I mean,
Yeah.
context is the king.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. And capturing it, productizing it, digitizing it will become the difference between two companies which are agentifying.
Right. Right.
But how is one better than the other?
Right. And so then do you think, Ravi, then the inevitable future is one where if context is the king or the queen and forms the core for differentiation, do you think the future is one where every team will be served by at least one, if not more, models or agents that are localized to that team? And so therefore the future of AI in the enterprise is a highly multi-model future.
It is. We've always said AI, the future of AI is going to be multi-agent systems. Unlike humans who don't operate in a domain, AI agents are better suited if they're domain specific. There is already a talk about how not just specific to one function, but specific to one job, multiple tasks are done by multiple AI agents, and they come together for a commonality of purpose.
Right.
I see the same underlying multi-model structure on multi-agent systems.
Right.
And if you have to build on that, what really then makes the difference is how they're interacting with each other, how they're interacting with humans. How is it different to another organization which is building the same structure?
Right. Right.
And hence, the playing field
Right.
of differentiation still is heterogeneity of enterprises.
Right. Right.
That
Right.
remains static.
That's right.
What changes though is human labor and digital labor coming together.
Right. And so then how should CIOs or CXOs in general be thinking about this? Because now we're talking about a whole new sort of workforce, right? Where you have lots of agents, one agent per team at least, if not more, that's localized to a team. So now you have to think of infrastructure, you have to think of all kinds of various...
all kinds of things. I mean,
Yeah.
as Jensen rightly pointed out, the IT departments will become the HR departments for agents.
Right.
I mean, they then become the HR departments of agents, and you have to get them well to come back to work. You have to keep
Right.
them motivated to come
Right,
back
right.
to work.
Right.
And how they serve the human endeavor will also become. It's interesting. One of my favorite professors, Adam Grant. I've done quite a bit of interactions with him. He spoke about how counterintuitively a lot of things we think are better done by humans. His thesis says they're better done by agents.
Right.
I mean, empathy, as we
Right,
think,
right,
is
right.
a human endeavor. He did an experiment of serving humans with agents and humans without telling the human who
Yeah,
was on the other
sure.
side. And it so happened that the agents actually served better than the humans.
Right.
So you don't know what the endeavor is. I mean, there's a counterintuitive thought that humans are good at verification, they're not good at creativity. And that's why we have less poets, less scientists, less writers. So should humans focus on verification and machines focus on creativity, which is a counterintuitive thought to
Yeah,
what
yeah.
it's not like I'm subscribing to it, but I equally feel excited about the thought because the other mainstream thinking is machines will take over this stuff and the human endeavor is going to be creativity.
Right.
But there is a rationale on the other side of why
Right.
if you want to do at scale creativity, machines are better than
Right.
humans. So, I mean, I don't know where this is going to pivot,
Right.
but it is certainly the status quo is no longer the future.
Right.
So, to that extent, I mean, this is going to be interesting. It'll evolve,
Do you
and
think
it'll keep us engaged.
do you think the future is one where we'll start to think of ratios between how many
It will
synthetic workers versus human
Yeah,
workers?
certainly. I mean,
Because teams are usually constructed based on some pyramid, some ratio, right?
Yeah.
Of it.
and how my AI labs, agents are by design have a flattish structure.
Right.
Even if you create a multi-agent structure, they're flattish.
Right. Right.
But enterprises are hierarchical.
Right.
So how does this come together?
Right.
And he's actually building, my AI labs. The head of my AI labs is actually building a thesis around it.
Right.
When humans and machines come together, machines are by design flattish, and humans are hierarchical.
Right.
So how does that work?
Right.
So I mean, there is so much to be done in this that I feel excited about just the art of the possibilities of what it can do to enterprise productivity.
Right. Because it seems like the inevitable conclusion from context being so important to every team is to now to start to ask how many synthetic workers do I need in a team?
Yeah,
Because who know my context.
there'll always be a cutoff point
Yeah.
where, for a particular job and a particular function, the ratio of human labor to digital labor will differ.
Right.
The work to be done on human capital
Right.
is, I think, a bigger opportunity for AI
Right.
in comparison to what the advances you have to do in technology.
Right.
I mean, it's fascinating how this is going to evolve, and the value, because a lot of the innovation has gone into the back end so far. It will actually move to the front, and as that happens, the value is going to be unleashed to enterprises.
Right. Right.
Fascinating conversation. Thank you, Rohan. And I mean, a lot of what we discussed today was actually in the Harvard, the HBR article as well. But this is fascinating. I look forward to the partnership. Look forward to evolving this more and create more advances for enterprises to remain heterogenic and differentiated as they are, but feed the productivity with the power of AI.
Right. No, thank you, Ravi. Really looking forward to working with your organization on actually breaking ground on enterprise AI, finally realizing the value of AI inside enterprises. I think that's a big, wide open space and organizations need help.
Thank you. Thank you so much.